They erased me from his life and called me unstable, said I was imagining everything while quietly moving money through accounts no one was supposed to see. But I followed it all the way to a federal case, and at 6:12 in the morning, agents walked into his office while I stood across the room watching his world fall apart. And by the time the charges were filed and prison was no longer a threat, but a certainty, I finally told him who I really was. And this was my revenge. Chapter 1. I was born on a stormy night in Portland, and the first thing my father ever said about me was that I might not be his. My mother told me that story once, years later, when she thought I could handle it. I remember how she avoided looking at me while she said it, like the words still had a weight she could not carry. She said he stood at the end of the hospital bed, dry from the rain, like he had stepped in from somewhere untouched. He did not ask if she was okay. He did not ask about me. He looked at the doctor and said he wanted a paternity test, not even a pause. Beside him was his mother, Evelyn Carter. My mother always described her the same way: calm, polished, the kind of woman who never needed to raise her voice because everyone else adjusted first. My mother said the room changed the moment she spoke. Nurses stopped smiling. The doctor chose his words more carefully. Even the air felt different. Within an hour, a lawyer showed up. My mother was still shaking from the delivery, still trying to understand what was happening when they placed papers in front of her, legal terms she did not understand, words spoken too quickly for her to follow. Temporary agreement, protection, liability. She asked what would happen if she did not sign. The lawyer did not answer. Evelyn did. Then this becomes very difficult for you. That was all it took. My mother signed with a hand that would not stop trembling. She told me she could still hear the sound of the pen against the paper. Sharp, final. Before she signed, my father said one more thing. He said make sure my name is not on anything until this is settled. He never touched me, never looked at me. By the time she was discharged, there was no test scheduled, no follow-up, no call. Just silence. A week later, she went to a legal clinic with me in her arms, asking what she could do. They told her she could file for a court-ordered test, but it would take time, months at best, years if the other side pushed back. And they would push back. Families like his always did. They told her she would need money, representation, time she did not have, stability she could not risk. She had just had a child. She was already behind on rent. Her job was barely secure after complications during leave. One case, one accusation, one whisper about instability, and she could lose everything. So she made a choice. She walked away. Not because she doubted the truth, because she knew the truth would not be enough. I grew up without a father, but that was never the part that stayed with me. It was the way no one explained anything. We lived in a small apartment above a corner store run by a couple who never asked questions. They let my mother pay late when she needed to. They watched me when her shifts ran long. They filled in the gaps without ever trying to name them. My mother worked constantly, nights, weekends, holidays. I remember waking up sometimes and finding her asleep at the kitchen table, still in her scrubs, her hand resting near a cup of coffee she never finished. I learned how to move quietly, how to take care of things without being asked, how to make sure she had one less thing to worry about. At school, things were different. Kids notice what is missing before they understand what it means. They would ask where my dad was. I would say I did not know. They would look at me like that answer explained everything. One time, a boy told me his dad said girls without fathers turn out wrong. He said it like he was repeating something obvious. I did not argue. I just stopped talking to him. As I got older, the questions changed, but they never stopped. Why did he leave? Did you ever try to come back? Do you look like him? I stopped answering. At 10, I stopped asking my mother about him.
At 13, I stopped expecting anything to change. At 16, I told myself I didn't need him. But that was not completely true. Because even when you stop asking out loud, the questions stay. Late at night, when everything was quiet, I would lie awake and replay a moment I'd never seen. That hospital room, the look on his face, the way he stood there and decided I was not worth knowing. I used to wonder if he hesitated, if there was even a second where he almost chose differently. But the older I got, the less I believed that. People like him don't make mistakes like that. They make decisions. And people like his mother make sure those decisions hold. I started noticing things I'd missed when I was younger. Who got opportunities, who got second chances, who never had to explain themselves, and who did. My mother filled out forms that never seemed to end. Insurance, housing, legal paperwork. Every system she dealt with took something from her: time, energy, dignity. And somewhere out there, there was a man who walked away from it all without consequence. Not because he was right, because he was protected. That was the moment I understood something no one had ever told me. Some people are not protected by truth, they are protected from it. I didn't hate him. Not then. Hate feels hot, immediate, loud. What I felt was different. It sat with me, grew slowly, became something steady. By the time I turned 17, I stopped wondering why my father left. I started thinking about what it would take to make him regret it.
Chapter 2. The idea did not arrive all at once. It settled in slowly, shaped by years of watching doors close in ways no one ever explained out loud. My mother worked 80 hours a week so I could have a chance at something better, and I made sure I did not waste it. I learned early that effort was the only thing I could control, so I leaned into it harder than anyone around me. At school, I was always just outside of everything. Not because I lacked ability, but because I lacked history. The other kids had stories that fit the room. I had silence. When I got into Westbridge Academy on scholarship, people congratulated me like I had crossed the finish line. What they did not understand was that I had only stepped into a different kind of race. One afternoon, during a group project, a boy glanced at my notes and said, "You are intense." I shrugged. "I have to be." He smirked. "Yeah, I guess when you don't have anything to fall back on, that makes sense." The table went quiet for a second. Then someone changed the subject. No one corrected him. No one needed to. That was the first time I realized something simple. People did not just see what you did. They saw where you came from, even when you did not say it. I carried that with me. By the time I graduated, I had built a record that looked impossible to ignore. Top scores, recommendations, achievements stacked carefully on top of each other. It got me into MIT. For a while, I thought things would be different there, that the playing field would level out once everyone had proven they belonged. It did not. It just became harder to see. Conversations shifted from obvious privilege to quiet advantage. Funding, networks, family connections that were never introduced as advantages, just facts. I applied for internships the way other people applied for favors. Dozens of applications, each one carefully written, each one ignored more often than not. One interview stayed with me longer than the rest. The recruiter studied my resume, nodding slowly, like he was impressed but not convinced. "You have done everything right," he said. I waited. Strong academics, good projects, solid references. I kept waiting. Then he leaned back in his chair. "But we're looking for someone who fits our environment." I felt the shift immediately. "What does that mean?" He smiled, polite and distant. "It means someone who aligns with our culture." I held his gaze. "And what kind of culture is that?" He hesitated, just enough to confirm what he was not saying. "One that values continuity." I walked out of that building knowing exactly what had happened. Doors do not close by accident. They close for people like me. After that, I stopped asking for clarity. I started reading what was left unsaid. I pushed harder.
I graduated near the top of my class and moved west for Stanford. Business school was not about intelligence, it was about positioning. Who you knew, how you moved, how you spoke in rooms where nothing was written down, but everything was decided. I learned fast. I built connections carefully, observed how influence passed between people who never seemed to question their place in the room. By the time I finished, I had a plan. I launched a startup with 2 classmates. The idea was strong, the early traction was real, and for a moment it felt like everything might actually work. Then it collapsed. The first investor backed out quietly, the second followed a week later. Meetings that had been confirmed suddenly needed to be rescheduled, then disappeared entirely. I sat across from one of our early backers in a glass office that suddenly felt smaller than it had before. "You said you believed in this," I told him. "I do," he said. "Then what changed?" He folded his hands, studying me in a way that felt different now. "You are all very capable." That word again. Capable. "But this is not just about the idea," he continued. "It's about long-term confidence." "In what?" "In the people behind it." I did not look away. "We have results." He nodded. "You have potential." Potential meant not yet. It meant not enough. It meant not trusted. As I walked out, I passed 2 founders laughing with the same investor who had just turned me down. I recognized one of their last names immediately. I did not need to ask how that meeting had gone. The company unraveled within months. I told my partners it wasn't their fault, even though part of me had already started connecting the pattern. Every time I got close, something invisible pushed back. That night, I came home earlier than usual. The apartment was quiet, except for the soft sound of paper shifting. My mother was sitting at the kitchen table, a stack of envelopes in front of her. She looked up when I walked in, then hesitated. "What is that?" I asked. "Letters," she said. "To who?" She took a breath. "To him." I stepped closer. "You wrote to him?" "Over the years," she said. "I just never sent them." I picked one up, feeling the weight of it in my hand. "Why not?" She looked at me, and for a second I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Fear. "Because I thought he would say no again." Her voice stayed steady, but her fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the table. "And this time you would understand it." I set the letter back down. "He already said no," I said. She closed her eyes briefly. "I know." We stood there in silence, and something inside me shifted into place. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just enough to make everything clearer. I thought about every rejection, every conversation that stopped just short of opportunity, every moment where I had been almost enough. I was not competing on the same field. I was proving I was allowed to be on it. And people like Victor Hale did not just walk away, they erase. Systems like his did not just protect him, they made sure people like me never showed up in the first place. I was not unlucky, I was excluded. Once I saw that, I couldn't unsee it. I looked at my mother again. "Did you ever think about going back? Fighting it?" She gave a tired smile. "Every day." "Then why didn't you?" "Because I chose you instead." That answer stayed with me long after she said it. Not as comfort, as cost. I went to my room that night and sat in the dark, replaying everything. Not just my life, but the structure around it, the patterns, the advantages that moved quietly between certain people. It was not random. It was built, and anything built could be taken apart. I was not going to prove him wrong. I was going to learn how the system worked and then use it to break him.
Chapter 3. I did not rush into it. After everything that happened, I learned that the fastest way to lose was to move too soon. So I watched, quietly, patiently, the way people do when they already know the outcome. They just need the right moments to step in. The name that kept surfacing was Archer Global. At first glance, it looked stable enough. Public statements were polished, numbers were acceptable, leadership sounded confident. But when I slowed down and read between the lines, the cracks were obvious. Revenue shifts that did not match their explanations.
departments restructuring too quickly, like they were trying to stay ahead of something. And buried in a compliance filing, a single note that most people would miss. Legal review pending. That was where I focused. I spent weeks studying them before I made a move. Leadership habits, hiring patterns, how decisions flowed from the top down. I wanted to understand the rhythm before I stepped inside it. When I applied, I did not use the name I was born with. I used the one I built. Alara Quinn. Clean record, strong credentials, nothing that could be traced back to anything that mattered. The interview process was faster than it should have been. That told me everything I needed to know. They were not being careful. They were desperate. On my first day, I felt it immediately. The tension under the surface, people moving quickly, speaking carefully, like they knew something was coming, but no one wanted to say it out loud. Within 2 weeks, I was pulled into meetings that had nothing to do with my role. Not because I asked, but because I fixed things no one else could. One afternoon, a senior director dropped a folder on my desk. "Can you take a look at this?" I skimmed it once and already saw the problem. "Your projections rely on assumptions that will not hold if the legal issue becomes public," I said. He frowned. "What legal issue?" I met his eyes. "The one you're not talking about." Silence. Then he exhaled. "Can you fix it?" "I can stabilize it." That was enough. 3 weeks later, I was in an executive meeting. That was where I saw him. Victor Hale. He looked exactly like someone who had built his life on control, every movement measured, every word calculated. But there was something else now, a hesitation that did not belong there. He did not recognize me. Of course he did not. I was never meant to be remembered. I presented my analysis, calm, precise, leaving just enough space for them to believe the solution was theirs. When I finished, the room went quiet for a moment. Victor leaned back slightly, studying me. "How long have you been here?" 3 weeks. A faint shift in his expression. "That is quick." "I learn fast." He nodded, but his eyes did not leave mine. For a second, something flickered. Not recognition, but not nothing either. After the meeting, he caught up to me in the hallway. "You handled that well," he said. "Thank you." He hesitated, just slightly. "Have we met before?" There it was, the closest anyone had come. I held his gaze without reacting. "I don't think so." Another pause, longer this time. Then he gave a small nod, like he was convincing himself. "Right." But when he walked away, he looked back once. That stayed with me. Not because I was afraid, because it meant something inside him remembered, even if he did not understand why. Daniel Brooks was a different problem. He did not rely on instinct. He relied on facts, and I did not give him enough of them to feel comfortable. He started watching me early. Small things at first. Questions that sounded routine, requests that went just a little deeper than necessary. One evening, he stopped me near the elevators. "You're moving fast," he said. "I'm doing my job." He studied me. "People don't move like that without a reason." "I get results." "That's not a reason." I did not answer. He stepped closer. "I looked into you," he said, quietly. "And?" "There's nothing there." "That sounds like a good thing." His jaw tightened. "It sounds like something is missing." I let a small smile form. "Maybe you're just not used to people who don't leave problems behind." He did not smile back. That was when I knew he wouldn't stop. A week later, he called me into his office. He closed the door before I even sat down. "Who are you, really?" Straight to it. I leaned back slightly. "Someone helping your company survive." That's not an answer. It's the only one you need. For a moment, the room felt smaller. Then he exhaled slowly. "You are either exactly what we need or something we're going to regret." I stood up. "Then I suggest you decide quickly." The compliance issue broke open sooner than expected. What had been quiet became public overnight. Media attention, investor pressure, legal exposure, everything at once. The board wanted control, Victor wanted solutions, Daniel wanted certainty. I gave them all something to hold on to. I worked directly with external counsel, a sharp attorney named Olivia Mercer. She did not waste time on introductions. She said, "Tell me where the real problem is." I walked her through everything, not just what was visible, but what was hidden, the decisions no one wanted to admit, the risks they kept pushing forward. And when I finished, she nodded once. "You're not guessing." "I don't guess." "Good," she said. "Neither do I." We rebuilt their approach piece by piece, tightening processes, preparing responses, creating something that could survive scrutiny. By the time we presented it, the room had shifted. They weren't questioning me anymore. They were relying on me. That's when Evelyn Hale noticed. She had been quiet the entire time, watching in a way that felt sharper than everyone else in the room. After the meeting, she approached me. "You're new," she said. "Yes. And already this involved. I go where I'm needed." Her gaze did not soften. "That usually comes with a cost. I've already paid mine." Something in her expression changed for just a second. "Be careful," she said. "Of what?" "Of thinking you're the only one who understands what's happening here." She walked away before I can respond. That stayed with me. Because for the first time, it felt like someone else was not just watching, they were seeing. That night, I finally opened the DNA results. I had been carrying them for days without looking, like the truth would change if I waited long enough. It didn't. The numbers were clear. No room for doubt. I stared at the page longer than I expected. Not shocked, not surprised, just still. He hadn't forgotten me. He had erased me. I folded the paper carefully and set it aside. Everything I thought I knew was not wrong, it was incomplete. And now I had the missing piece. I was inside his company, inside his decisions, inside the life he built after pretending I never existed. For the first time, it didn't feel distant. It felt close. Close enough to see the cracks. Close enough to choose exactly where to start breaking them.
Chapter 4. I did not wait for the room to settle before I moved. There is a moment in every controlled environment where control is already gone. People just have not admitted it yet. I could feel it the second I walked in. Conversations were quieter, eyes sharper, every glance carrying more weight than usual. They all knew something was coming. They just did not know it was me. Victor sat at the head of the table, shoulders tight, like he was holding everything together by force. Across from him, Caroline Hale looked composed as ever, calm in the way people are when they believe they still have the upper hand. Daniel barely looked up when I took my seat, but I could tell he had not stopped digging, not after what he found. Good. The meeting started with the lawsuit, exactly as planned. Legal exposure, investor pressure, controlled damage, words that sounded serious without actually changing anything. Daniel went first. "We are past the point of managing optics," he said. "We need full internal transparency." Caroline did not agree. "What we need is stability, not chaos driven by incomplete information." I let them talk. I let them build their version of the situation, neat and contained. Then I stood. "I agree with both of you," I said. The room shifted. Victor frowned. "Then sit down and let us handle it." I did not move. You cannot handle something you are still pretending to understand. That landed. Daniel looked at me, interest sharpening. Caroline's voice cooled. "This is not your place. It became my place the moment your decisions started putting the company at risk." Victor leaned forward. "Careful. I have been careful." Silence settled in, heavier now. I connected my file to the screen and brought up the data, not just numbers, timelines, internal approvals, delayed reports, every point where they chose control over truth. You ignored compliance warnings, I said. You delayed disclosure. You allowed legal exposure to grow because it was easier than dealing with it. Caroline shook her head. That is your interpretation. It is your pattern. Victor's jaw tightened. This is not relevant to the board's agenda. It is exactly the agenda. I paused, letting the room feel it. Then I stepped forward and placed the document on the table. There is one more thing you need to address. Caroline stood immediately. No, she had not even seen it yet. No, we are not doing this. I looked at her steady. You do not get to decide that anymore. Her eyes flashed. You think you can walk in here and take control? I am not taking anything. I am returning something. Victor's voice came lower. What are you talking about? I slid the report closer to him. My name is Alara Quinn. A breath passed. Then I said it, and I'm your daughter. The room broke without moving. Caroline stepped forward, sharp, fast. This is a lie. Her voice was louder now, a calculated move to destabilize this board. I did not look at her. I kept my eyes on Victor. He stared at the paper, then at me, like he was trying to force something into place that refused to fit. No, he said, but it was not solid. It was thin. You knew, I said. His head shook slightly. I would have known. You chose not to. That hit harder. Daniel stood slowly. What is this? Olivia Mercer moved before anyone else could control it. We verify it, she said. Now. Caroline turned on her. This is not a legal matter. It is now, Olivia replied. Victor closed his eyes for a second, then opened them again. Run the test. Caroline stepped closer to him. You cannot let her do this. He did not look at her. It's already done. That was the moment she lost ground. The test moved fast, faster than anything else in that company had moved in years. No delays, no deflection, no space to bury it. And then there was nothing left but waiting. Daniel did not waste it. He found everything. Old hospital records that shouldn't have been easy to access, legal documents buried under settlements, agreements signed under pressure. He brought them to me without saying much. You were right, I said. I know. He studied me. You came here for this. I came for the truth. And what happens after that? I held his gaze. You will see. The day the results came back, no one pretended anymore. The room was full before the meeting even started. Victor looked like he hadn't slept. Caroline looked like she'd decided something and was holding on to it with everything she had. Olivia stood at the front, file in hand. She did not draw it out.
Chapter 5. Things did not explode. They unraveled. At first, it looked controlled. Statements were released, meetings were scheduled, lawyers stepped in with the kind of calm that only comes from experience. But underneath that, everything was shifting. Caroline Hale was gone within days. Officially, it was framed as a transition, mutual agreement, strategic decision, the usual language companies use when they do not want to admit something broke. Inside the company, no one believed that. People stopped saying her name out loud. Emails that used to include her suddenly did not. The space she occupied disappeared faster than I expected. That is how power leaves, quietly, then all at once. The investigation moved quickly after that. External counsel expanded their scope, pulling records that had been sealed, cross-checking decisions that had never been questioned before. The more they found, the harder it became to contain. Investors did not panic. They stepped back. Calls became shorter. Conversations became careful. Support turned into distance without anyone needing to say it directly. The story was changing, and this time no one could control it. Victor tried. He scheduled a press conference before the narrative could turn completely against him. I watched it from my office, the volume low, the captions doing most of the work. He stood there like he always had, measured, composed, but there was something different in the way he held himself, less certainty. "There were decisions made that should have been handled differently," he said. That was as close as he was going to get. "And there are people who were affected by those decisions in ways that cannot be undone." He paused, long enough for it to feel real. "I take responsibility. Not everything, but enough. Enough to acknowledge me without saying my name. Enough to admit that something had been buried. That was all I needed." Later that day, he asked to see me. I considered ignoring it. In the end, I went. His office felt smaller than it used to, or maybe he did. He stood when I walked in, like he wasn't sure what position to take anymore. "I did not know," he said. There it was again. It sounded different this time, less defense, more like regret. "That does not change anything," I said. "It should," he replied. "It does not." He took a step closer, then stopped. "I would have done something." "You had time," I said. "You just didn't look." That landed. For a second, he looked like he was about to argue. Then he didn't. "I should have looked harder," he said quietly. That was the first honest thing he had given me. It still wasn't enough. He offered financial support after that, carefully, like he thought it might fix something. I declined. He offered his name. I declined that too. What I accepted was simpler, a role. Not because of him, in spite of him. The board needed someone who understood what had actually happened, not just what they wanted to believe. I was already doing the work. Now it had a title. Some people questioned it. Most did not. Results answer questions faster than explanations ever will. Daniel adjusted faster than anyone. He stopped trying to figure me out and started working with me. One evening, he leaned against my office door, watching me go through a report. "You knew exactly where to hit them," he said. "I knew where they were weakest." He nodded slowly. "You could have burned the whole thing down." I did not need to. That was the difference. Destroying something is easy. Letting it expose itself takes more time. The investigation into Caroline kept expanding. It wasn't just one decision. It never is. It was a pattern, years of controlled outcomes, quiet pressure, things handled behind closed doors that should never have been handled. She fought it. Hard. But without control of the narrative, her words did not carry the same weight. Eventually, she stepped away completely. Not by choice, by necessity. My mother did not come to the office. She did not need to. She watched everything from home, where she had spent years learning how to stay quiet. When the official acknowledgement came through, when her name appeared in documents that could not be erased, she just sat there for a long time. I sat with her. I told her, "You can say something." She shook her head. She spent so long thinking none of this would ever matter. It matters now. She looked at me, eyes softer than I had seen in years. "You did this." I finished it, because she had started it a long time ago. She just wasn't allowed to win. Now she did, and that was enough. People think winning looks loud. It doesn't. It looks like this. Quiet, clear, unquestionable. Victor stayed, not in the same way. Something in him shifted. He spoke less in meetings, listened more, like he was trying to understand something he had avoided for too long. We spoke occasionally, short conversations, careful ones, not trying to fix anything, just not pretending anymore. That was as close to closure as I needed, because I didn't come here to rebuild a relationship. I came here to take back the truth, and I did. I did not destroy them. I just stopped protecting them. That was all it took. So let me ask you something. If you had the chance to expose everything, to make the people who erased you finally see what they did, would you forgive them, or would you walk away knowing you never needed them in the first place? Be honest. And if you want more stories like this, stay here with me, because not every ending is clean, and the next one might hit a little closer than this. If this story meant something to you, stay with me, share your thoughts below, and follow along for more stories that might feel a little closer to your own.